Conversations with Elders, hosted by yours truly, Louis Marie Blanche, welcoming you to Glastonbury Radio 432, where we will be TED Talking in tongues with the elders of all ages, all generations, all races, cultures, and creeds. All gender, religious, or political preferences will be honored and encouraged on Glastonbury Radio 432, Conversations with Elders, where it is our treasured pleasure to roll out the red carpet of golden liquid love light to you in honor of the queendom come, soul dancing free to life's heartbeat drum, in honor of mother, daughter, sister, lover, priestess, goddess, friend, sharing the blessings of love's perfect stranger, Deja Vu, welcoming you to Glastonbury Radio 432.
It's too cosmic, much too cosmic for me. Much too cosmic.
Aloha, hola, aho, hello. We are returning again to the Garden of a Desert Rose, and we will be starting with Chapter 7, entitled Sand and Pearls. To see a world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and an eternity in an hour. William Blake.
Lenny and her children drove to school discussing worms and snakes and all creatures that crawled upon their bellies. Laughing at herself felt great medicine for her soul. By the time they pulled up in front of the school, there was no line of cars. They were running late. Some of Mac's friends were standing by the entrance waving him over. He'd already hugged his mother once this morning, so Lenny didn't ask for more. Elizabeth still allowed public hugs and kisses, so Lenny gave her both. As Elizabeth ran toward the front door of the school, Dawn's niece, Pearl, held the door open for her. It appeared Pearl's parents were just as late as Lenny's for dropping her off. Lenny glanced around the parking lot. That's when she saw Dawn's brother's blue truck. But Dawn's brother was not behind the wheel, it was Dawn. And apparently she'd been waiting for Lenny. She was waving her over. Dawn had been hauling rock for her grandma Mimi's Christmas present. Mimi had asked her children to build her a rock garden for Christmas. That's all she wanted. She had a low spot in her yard that wouldn't grow flowers. She decided it would make a good spot for rocks and hardy ground cover. Lenny looked in her rearview mirror. A car was coming, but she had time to turn her car sharply to the left and into an open spot directly behind Dawn. Lenny rolled down her window and yelled at her friend. "Move it, you hussy," she yelled. "You're blocking traffic." Dawn stepped out of the truck laughing. She was wearing paint-splattered bib overalls with bright red and white striped socks. Her just crawled out of bed hair and overalls made Lenny laugh. "I can't tell if you're in a good mood or a foul mood. What is it?" Dawn teased. "Right now I'm wondering what Halloween witch you stole those socks from." "Girlfriend, you don't like my socks?" Excuse me, Dawn said as she pulled up a pant leg, kicking off a shoe, hiking her leg onto Lenny's open window. Her socks hugged each toe individually. "Well, I have to admit, I sort of do. Elizabeth would love them too. Where'd you get them?" Lenny asked. I can't tell you because Pearl has given Elizabeth a pair just like them at my party tonight. She insisted on giving me my socks as an early Christmas present so I could enjoy wearing them. That girl, she can't wait to open her presents. She's driving us all crazy." "That's so sweet. Pearl is just a little doll inside and out," Lenny responded as Dawn lifted her foot off Lenny's car and replaced her shoe. "Well, I had an even wilder dream last night. Have you ever heard of saying red and black, or red and yellow, a friend of Jack, but red excuse me, I'm reading ahead. Red and black, a friend of Jack, but red and yellow will kill a fella. Are we talking about snakes? Don asked, frowning. Exactly, Lenny said and nodded. I dreamed about the kill a fella kind last night. Get out of here, Don said with a giggle as her dark almond eyes grew large. I'm telling you the truth, Don. That snake was wiggling in my hand and it felt real. It would have killed me had I not flung it into the air. Where it went or where it came from, I do not know, but I've never had such a vivid and horrifying, real, otherworldly type experience in my entire life. Lenny proceeded to describe all the details of her dream as Don listened with intense interest. When Lenny finished with a description of tossing the snake into the air, Don remained quiet for a moment before finally speaking. Well, I'm going to use the word your granny always used when you wanted to Nancy Drew something to death. Let it be. Carl Jung never said let it be. He dug down until he reached into a vision of heaven. I don't want to think about this snake, but it feels too important to ignore. I know you and everyone else think my visions seem completely foolish and ungraspable, so do I. But don't you think I need to explore this further? Lenny asked. And after all, look at all that has happened to me in the last 2 days. You have to admit this last horrifying vision is most unusual. And what isn't unusual about your life, Lenny? Well, nothing, Lenny answered. Since early childhood, my lucid dreaming has shaped my relationship to the world, for better or worse. Too often in relationships with men, I've lost my individuality. Their opinions of me mattered so much. I stopped being me, free and happy. Like last night, in the early part of my dream, before the snake, I lost myself when a handsome man in a cafe judged me unattractive. Your snake was probably a symbol of your snake in the grass ex-husband, Don said, looking serious with a smile. But your Gandhi story helped me so much last night. I think something was dredged out of me by your words. I went to bed trying hard to find a way to grow more open. I fell asleep forgiving everybody in the world, including myself. I want more than anything to develop more soul power by thinking the best of everyone I meet. What if this dream symbolized me getting rid of some inner judgments and unresolved anger issues with my ex-husband? Don't you think energies like that are as deadly to one's soul growth as a snake might be to our body? I think it all fits together somehow. You know, that does ring true to me too, Don said. I like that. You need to write that down and don't drive too fast to work, but hasten on and catch up with your visions, Lenny. They are not foolish. Your vivid dreams may feel like a curse sometimes, but they are guiding you to a greater, happier version of you. I can't wait until we have time to share the entire dream together. I'll try to write it all down later, Lenny said. Thanks for your kind words. I needed to hear them. But right now I've got to get to work. The friends hugged and Dawn hurried back to her brother's truck. Once again, Lenny decided to drive to work without playing the radio. She needed silence. She wanted to mentally map out her busy day. She and the other secretaries would exchange gifts during their 15-minute break. Then at 1 o'clock, they would have lunch and all the coaching staff with all the coaching staff in the athletic cafeteria. She'd heard the food was fabulous, which she figured it probably had to be in order to pull in good recruits for the football team. After work, it was Dawn's church choir program, followed by an after party at Dawn's house. As Lenny turned onto Alcoa Highway, she thought about how quickly she and Dawn had bonded. Excuse me. They had actually only met 3 years ago, but it felt as if their sisterhood stretched back much further. Elizabeth was exactly responsible for bringing the two together. Dawn often helped her brother drive his only child, Pearl, to school. Pearl and Elizabeth met in kindergarten and became fast friends. One morning, not long after kindergarten had started, Elizabeth had insisted on wearing multiple barrettes. Lenny figured it was because her hair was so baby fine they wouldn't stay in place. But when Elizabeth begged for additional pigtails beyond her customary two, Lenny had thought it a bit odd. It had taken a lot to talk the child out of it. Later in the week, Dawn picked up Pearl at the same time Lenny arrived to pick up Elizabeth. The two girls ran out of the school building, holding hands and giggling. Seeing Pearl's braided multi-pigtails on each side of her little head, Lenny immediately understood Elizabeth's envy. She'd forgotten her little girls love to look just like, she had forgotten how little girls love to look like each other. Coordinating fashions with a best friend was something she herself fondly recalled, although now she tried hard not to dress like anybody else. She figured the suppressed artist in her was trying to express her individual uniqueness. Lenny remembered the first day she met Dawn. She was wearing a dark blue wool business suit with a large rhinestone angel pin perched on her shoulder. Her neck was graced with a lovely strand of pearls. "Hello," Dawn said in a friendly voice, beaming a wide and incredibly beautiful smile as she extended her right hand. "My name is Dawn. You must be Elizabeth's mother." "Yes, I am," Lenny answered, "and I think our daughters are best friends." "Oh, she's not my child, just my heart and pigtails," Dawn had said, with a grin growing bigger and bigger. "I'm her auntie, Dawn. Pearl has been talking about Elizabeth every day since school started. She cried the whole week before school began and even insisted she was too sick to go when the day arrived. My brother and I were betting how soon her teacher would call, asking us to pick up our crying child. But she met Elizabeth and that cured her. My Elizabeth couldn't wait to go to school," Lenny shared, "and she talks about Pearl all the time too. Let me tell you, convincing her that her wispy blonde hair can't make a head full of pigtails like Pearl was not easy." Both girls laughed. Then Dawn mentioned that with Pearl being an only child, she might overcome some of her shyness if Elizabeth visited her after school for a play date. "That sounds great," Lenny responded. "Elizabeth would love it." On the spot, they picked a day that was good for both of them. Lenny would drop off her daughter on the way to take her son to football practice. Then she would pick her up on the way home when the practice was over. Soon the two women started scheduling their own play dates. Dawn was an avid hiker and Lenny loved hiking, but hadn't gone since her granny's death, spending long hours on the trails in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park had given them lots of time to get better acquainted. On a short hike to Abrams Falls one day, Lenny had remarked how much she liked Pearl's name. Dawn explained Pearl's name came from her grandma Mimi. "So your Mimi's name is really Pearl?" Lenny asked. "No," Dawn answered, laughing. "Here's the story. My brother's wife got pregnant before they got married. They were young and had a lot of student loans. They were torn apart as to what to do. Neither one was ready for marriage, and they were both afraid to tell their parents. My brother finally broke down one night and told Mimi. They've always been as thick as thieves." "What did Mimi say when she heard the news?" Lenny asked. "Best advice I've heard her speak," she said. "When life kicks sand in your shell, make a pearl." "So they did," Lenny exclaimed, laughing. "Yes, and that's how Pearl got her name." "That's a beautiful story," said Lenny. "Is that why you like wearing pearls?" "Well, I guess you can say that. When my brother's wife graduated from college, Mimi gave her a string of pearls. So when I got my bachelor's degree, she gifted me two. On her teacher's salary, I'm sure that wasn't easy," Lenny said, shaking her head. Her, she's as tight as they come, but generous when the occasion feels big. After hearing Dawn's story, Lenny shared with Dawn how Elizabeth got her name. Lenny's ancestors on both sides of her family tree were from the Blue Ridge mountainous region of Georgia. After Lenny's parents divorced, her mother's mother had moved in to help raise Lenny and her two siblings. Granny arrived with a big metal trunk full of family keepsakes. Granny shared several items from the trunk, including her mother's infant moth-eaten bathing suit with an applique of a pumpkin on the belly. There was also her grandfather's handkerchief, leather baby shoes, awards he won at work, and his wedding shirt. Granny's modest 1920 wedding dress had been carefully folded up in tissue paper in the trunk as well. But it was the love letters from Granny's mother to her father Lenny loved best. The letters were inked in fancy Victorian-style penmanship, and they smelled like faded violets. The letters had all been signed, "Your loving wife, Elizabeth," and Lenny quickly fell in love with the name. Elizabeth's husband was part Cherokee, but when Lenny begged to hear Granny's stories about this branch of the family tree, Granny's lips got tight and then like excuse me, Granny's lips got tighter than a new griddle. Before long,
Excuse me. Granny's lips got tighter than a new girdle.
Oh, girdle. I can't even read my own words. I know my eyes got misty at one point because I was remembering some of these things. Before long, Lenny's reflections and memories of when she and Dom met had driven her straight into the employee parking lot. She hardly remembered the ride to work again. Lenny stepped from her car. The air was as cold as the steel gray sky looked. Today was the day she should have worn her stovetop boots. Instead, she opted for her red snakeskin heels. She sprinted as fast as she could toward the athletic building, slowing down only slightly as she made her way up the steep flight of concrete steps. There you go.
And that is chapter 7, Sand and Pearls. So the wisdom of that chapter, that really was true in your life? Someone told you?
Yes, I changed all of the friends' names. In fact, Dawn, I had a dear friend. She was a mixed race chocolate kind of friend, and I fashioned her out of two other friends, and her stories. And then Mitzi, of course, the other friend that I speak of, is a combination as well. I think when you're turning your myth into fiction, that it's better to see all of these outside friends that come into your life as within, so without, as a part of, they reflect an aspect of yourself. And so these are fictionalized, but yes, the happenings were real. And Julie, with her wispy, thin blonde hair, her best friend in school.
You're Julie, your daughter.
Oops, yes, my daughter. I'm sparing all the people in my life from naming them because they may or may not be happy.
On a first name basis only, they won't have it easy.
No, they won't. But yes, her little friend was, of course, brown skinned, and her best friend was that Pearl. Now, I'm not using that little girl's name, of course, but she had lots of little hair bows, little plastic hair bows and pigtails, and my daughter was so jealous of that. And her hair would only hold two, and then they'd be out by the end of the day. So that is true, sweetheart. And it's a
So
precious memory.
the sand and pearl story.
Yes, I was told that about that time.
Mhm.
And it wasn't Dawn, the character Dawn, but it was told to me. And I had written it in my dream book. And so when I started writing my myth, it popped out at me and went, oh, that's perfect to rename that little girl and include that in Sand and Pearl chapter. And it was totally in my imagination. It was a beautiful thing in my imagination that grew into this chapter. And also it was taken from my real life experiences. The whole book was.
Well, I'm finding, I told you in between our reading these chapters, it's really amazing that I guess it's very a belittling cliche to think that, well, just some average housewife, mom of 2 kids, what kind of wisdom could a person like that gain in life, you know? And I'm seeing as these chapters unfold that there's a lot of depth and wisdom in everyday things. I mean, things like, yes, well, relationship and how relationships can, you know, season our hearts and souls. But then for the journey that a lot of women go through is like you mentioned, I think you mentioned in this chapter, how you felt like you lost your individuality.
I did.
Yes.
I was always the little girl trying to get daddy's love, certainly in the first 2 failed marriages. And a parent and child relationship works for a lot of people, but I'm too spontaneously childlike and playful to have a dictator in my life as an equal partner. The beauty of you and I, and I might as well, and you know this to be true, is that in partnership, for instance, the examples we have in the scriptures and is Yeshua and Mary Magdalene. She was in truth called the apostle to the apostles because she was a visionary and he came to her in dreams. And I'm not ashamed to admit he has come often to me in dreams. And at first I doubted my own sanity when these wonderful visions happened that ascended masters would come to me. I am truly a humble person who just, I know who I am, a fairy artist with lucid dreams. That's what they call them. I say I'm awake when I'm dreaming. But the truth about it is that he's cosmic. And Mary Magdalene, who's often seen in my energy field, she's cosmic. And her day has come. The divine feminine energies are flooding this planet. And it's wonderful. So this is my myth. This is who I am. I'm not the intellect that the masters that I read, like Carl Jung, and this was in 40 years ago. This was the wisdom that we had available. So many more have burst forth on the scene. I won't go into naming a few because I love so many. But back to what you said about it is you and I, as a cosmic couple, like for example, Yeshua and Mary walk side by side, walk hand in hand equal. The sex of the male and the sex of the female, not one is more superior or one more inferior. And the joy of manifesting, actually, you know, and I know, we have manifested this relationship, but it took a lot of missing the mark to get where we're at. And when it does happen, it's joyful and wonderful and should be everyone's aim to achieve.
Well, we talked about that earlier today. One of my beloved guiding lights was Buckminster Fuller. And he said, make the biggest mistakes as fast as possible.
I did that.
And then another one of my partner, Dr. John, he said, man, nothing beats a failure but a try.
I love that.
You know, if you keep trying, there's success in that alone. Just to be tenacious enough and persistent enough to continue no matter what happens, to keep believing that you can make it.
Right.
Because the Olympic spirit isn't always about getting the bronze, silver, or gold medal. It's about getting yourself ready to compete, not with the others, but you're actually more competing with yourself. You're doing it for the self. And I see in these chapters you're reading, in that common, seemingly simple ABC, everyday housewife life, single mom with kids' existence of working and trying to keep food on the table and pay the bills and still love yourself and hopefully be alive enough to have another relationship. That takes
Right.
a lot of work. And it takes working on yourself.
Right.
And obviously, as this beautiful work, The Garden of a Desert Rose, unfolds, we are hearing the story of a woman who has found wisdom in places that many others might not look. So let's go on with chapter 8 of Paper Rose. Okay.
And I had a thought and it flew out, so it's time to read.
This is the quote that begins chapter 8. The mythological figure of the universal mother imputes to the cosmos the feminine attributes of the first, nourishing and protecting presence. The fantasy is primarily spontaneous, for there exists a close and obvious correspondence between the attitude of the young girl towards its mother and that of the adult toward the surrounding material world. Our beloved Joseph Campbell.
Those who enter through the side door of the University of Tennessee Stokely Athletic Center immediately walk upon an indoor track arena. If you're wearing tennis shoes, no one in front of you can hear you coming. But that's not the case if you're wearing high heels. When Lenny entered the building, the sound of her steps echoed down the long hallway. A couple of basketball players were running laps, and Lenny envied their energy and physical fitness routine. If she wasn't walking in the woods among evergreens and hardwoods, Lenny didn't like exercising. After 2 years of full-time work while raising kids and going to school 3 nights a week, Lenny thought it aerobic just to get out of bed. Mindlessly, she watched the athletes run past her. Then someone in tennis shoes suddenly appeared behind her, inches away from her right shoulder. Lenny turned toward the figure and saw it was a man she didn't recognize. His smile looked almost too friendly. She half smiled back, turned away, and quickened her pace and held tight to her purse. He looked safe, she thought, but she didn't want to take any chances. He appeared to be somewhere in his 50s. For a brief moment, Lenny wondered if he was the secret lover of Miss Red from the library. I did remember that. His salt and pepper hair matched his tweed sports jacket, which screamed teacher with its tan leather elbow patches. "I know something about you," the man said, chuckling. Lenny stopped in her tracks. She'd heard those lines before when she was 16. Was it some kind of cosmic pickup line? "What do you know?" Lenny asked carefully, not certain she wanted to hear the answer. "I can tell you're a happy person. I saw it in your eyes when you smiled." "A lot can be read by looking into someone's eyes," he said, grinning ear to ear. Lenny hated to tell the man his intuition was way off the mark. As they continued to walk down the hallway, silence filled the narrow space between his broad shoulders and her red sweater. "Tell me something," he said with a suspicious wink. What would you like to be when you grow up? Lenny looked him in the eyes to see if he was serious. This man was definitely a charmer, like her first husband, who would have easily said something like that. It raised Lenny's suspicions immediately. But remembering her precious conversation with Dawn, how Gandhi believed the best about everyone, Lenny switched off her judge and began to think kind thoughts about this man. She decided to play his game until her hand was safely attached to the outer door of her office. A child, she said, looking up at him without a trace of a smile. A smile, after all, might give the man the wrong signal. Why, young lady, that's the best answer I've heard all day. Well, it's still early, Lenny reminded him. No, he said, shaking his head, you win the prize. He reached across his chest and removed a red crepe paper rose from his lapel pocket. She hadn't even noticed it before he took it off. Oh, no, really, Lenny said, blushing as she shook her head. That was a silly answer. I doubt it's worth the prize, and besides, I'm sure you'll hear a better answer before the day is over. I'm absolutely confident I will not hear such a wise answer again. Not today or any other day. The prize belongs to you, the man insisted. You're making me blush, Lenny said, feeling her cheeks grow rosy. The man stopped walking and stood holding out his hand, offering her the paper rose. You must accept your prize, little girl. Now go and have yourself a very Merry Christmas, he laughed. Lenny looked down at the paper rose in his hand. As she took it from him, she checked to see if he was wearing a wedding ring. And he was. If this was Miss Red's professor, she understood her attraction to him. The man nodded goodbye, turned, and left without a word. Lenny stood in the hall for a moment, astonished. After all, strangers didn't give her paper roses every day. Smiling, she walked a little further and was soon unlocking the inner door to the football office. For the first time in a long time, she was the first to arrive. For some unknown reason, traffic or faulty alarm clocks must have slowed her other co-workers from getting to work on time. She checked the clock above the doorway. She was only running 5 minutes late, which seemed almost impossible. She quickly dismissed this oddity, turned on the lights, and hung her blue cape in the closet. She hadn't bothered to put it on in the car, but she might need it later on tonight. A cold front was moving into East Tennessee. She set her purse on top of her desk and searched for her desk keys. Almost immediately after transferring the phones from the night service, her desk phone rang. It was her co-worker, Katie. When she got to her car this morning, she discovered one of her tires had a slow leak. She had to take it in for repair or replacement. She told Lenny she'd be running late. Lenny promised to give the bad news to their managing coach, but Katie assured Lenny not to worry. She'd definitely make it to work by lunchtime. Lenny hung up the phone. Then she opened her pencil drawer and retrieved a long hat pin left over from a homecoming queen corsage. She pinned the red rose to her sweater. Then she took out her computer compact mirror and admired her paper prize, the kindness of the stranger. Oddly enlivened her. She put away her mirror and walked into the break room to make coffee. One of her coaches always complained her coffee was too weak for his taste. She filled the metal container to the highest mark. If this didn't wake him up, she thought nothing would. Yesterday, her thoughts primarily focused on her unfriendly neighbor, Miss Tallulah, and then her ex-husband. She lacked the will or the power to change how she felt about either one of them, but she wanted to try. It felt good last night to at least try to apologize to her grumpy old neighbor. You can take a girl out of the South, but you can't take good old-fashioned Southern manners out of a girl. Back at her desk, Lenny tore December 22nd off of her desk calendar. The newly exposed photograph depicted a snow-capped mountain with its mirror image reflected upon the still waters of an enormous lake. The scripture was taken from the 23rd Psalm of David. It read, "He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul." As Lenny thought about the mountain's reflection, an idea started forming in her head. She opened her purse and once more took out her cracked compact mirror. Opening the compact, she gazed at the unevenness of a reflection in the shattered glass. As a human being, she realized she was a living expression of millions of cracked thoughts and emotions, just like her reflection in the compact mirror. Then she looked back at the photograph. A mountain stays where it is. She thought to herself, just like Granny said a sinner does, it stays put. But the mountain's reflection was altogether different. That was a moving thing. From one day to the next, the reflection probably changed. When the sun is shining, the reflection looks just the way it does in the picture, Lenny thought. But if it's cloudy and gray the next day, the reflection would look very different, even though the mountain itself doesn't change. By 9:45 a.m., Katie had arrived wearing a trench coat and carrying a wet umbrella. Katie talked about how lucky she was that her slow leaking tire didn't become a blowout on the interstate. By noon, all the secretaries were buzzing around their bright orange Christmas tree. The head coach, Majors, arrived with 4 of the most beautifully wrapped gifts Lenny had ever seen. He beamed when he explained his wife was great at wrapping gifts. It charmed Lenny to hear him speak so proudly of his wife's creative talents. While all the secretaries were excitedly sharing or good-naturedly complaining about their holiday plans, the main line rang. Lenny hurried to pick up the receiver. The man on the other end insisted on talking to the defensive coordinator. Lenny tried to explain he'd just gone into a staff meeting and was not taking calls, but the man on the phone was not getting the message. He was angry, and he felt he had valuable advice that would improve the team's chances for a bowl win. He refused to leave his name and instead launched into his planned speech if he were to speak to a coach. Lenny often took calls like this after a losing game, and she hated it when the callers were rude. But today she actually enjoyed it and doodled on her steno pad as the caller replayed the entire football season over the phone, not realizing Lenny wasn't really listening. First, she drew a rose with a black ballpoint pen. She loved to sketch with pens instead of pencils. They translated her feelings onto paper in simple black and white, no muddy grays to fuss with. Her rose grew large as she drew it. She left the center open. After all, she wasn't sure where center was. Then, still drawing, she tucked a tiny newborn baby into the center of her rose. Like this morning stranger who suddenly appeared out of nowhere, this tiny baby popped into Lenny's head and spilled out of the end of her pen. "Have you heard a word I've said?" the caller suddenly asked angrily. Lenny snapped her attention back to the phone, realizing the man had paused in his discourse, expecting a response from her that never came. "Oh, I know how you feel," she told him with as much sympathy as she could muster. "I get emotional about our losses too, but I'm simply not allowed to interrupt a staff meeting with your suggestions." "I hear voices in the background. Sounds to me like you're not telling me the truth." "Oh, that's the secretarial staff. We aren't included in staff meetings. Actually, we're in the middle of our office Christmas party. But like I said, I'll be more than happy to take a message. I didn't catch your name." "I said it 3 times. I don't think you've heard a word I've said, young lady." He sounded exasperated. The caller was right, but Lenny didn't know how to respond. "Well, I'm all ears now," she said cheerfully. The phone line went dead. and Lenny shrugged as she replaced the receiver in its cradle. She smiled down at her drawing and tucked it into her top drawer just as the phone rang again. This time it was Mitzi, and Lenny filled her in on the highlights of the snake dream, promising to give her more details at the after concert party at Dawn's house that night. Mitzi told Lenny she had found the dream workshop handouts she had promised to share with her, thinking they might help Lenny decode her granny's message. Bess, darling, you're so sweet and perky, Lenny teased. Bess was perky? No, you are, Lenny said, laughing. Hey, Dawn told me about your ex not being able to keep the kids so you can go to the bowl game. I know you have family in town, but I'd love to stay with Elizabeth and Mac for 3 nights while you'll be gone. Oh, Mitzi, I can't ask you to do that. You didn't ask me, Mitzi responded, and besides, I owe you for taking care of Gray while I was on vacation. 1 cat doesn't equal 2 wildcat children. It's final, Mitzi declared. After all, you can't say no because that's my Christmas gift to you. Otherwise, I'll have to go out at the last minute and get you some store-bought stuff you probably don't need or want. Come on, Lenny, I really want to do this for you. Lenny took a deep breath. It was just like Mitzi to do something wonderfully unselfish as a gift. As stunned as Lenny was at the generous offer, she also knew there was no saying no. I'm trying to think of a bigger word than thank you, but I can't think of one. It's perfect, Mitzi whispered, because I know you mean it. See you tonight. At 12:15 p.m., the phone lines were transferred to another office. The entire football staff, along with other athletic office personnel, left the building and paraded merrily toward the athletic cafeteria. The food all looked extraordinarily lush and rich. It was served buffet style. By dessert time, Lenny knew she couldn't eat another bite. But then someone walked by her carrying a bowl of ice cream, dripping with rich, dark brown, hot syrup. She not only got the ice cream, but she also got a dark chocolate brownie and smothered it with hot fudge along with whipped topping on top. She might get sick, she thought, but it would be worth it. While no one was looking, Lenny unfastened the side button of her pencil skirt. It felt good to be able to breathe on her own on her way back to the office.
The wisdom of that chapter for you is what?
Well, I drew it. I redrew. I actually had that experience of a professor asking me that. And so from a little black and white drawing, when it came time for me to design, I wanted, of course, as an artist, to design my own book cover. I redid it. And what I said to him was, I knew he was kind of flirting, but when he said, what do you want to be, little girl, when you grow up? Of course, I'm a woman of 32. It just popped in my head to say a child. And not only a child, but this reminds me of the words of Yeshua that said, do not stop the children from coming to him, for such is the kingdom of God. And it doesn't matter if you're 7 or 70 or whatever age you are. Having that open, empty, innocent joy of life is what I think he meant. And that's someone who knows they're not their myth, they're not their story, they're not their failures or failed relationships.
Not necessarily their age.
And we aren't. We aren't on the inside. That's our secret to looking young. Yes, so.
But that's a very profound answer. What do you want to be when you grow up?
Mm-hmm.
A child. That's deep. Now, did you think?
That really happened. No. That really.
Was an honest,
that was an honest.
Answer.
That was an honest
well, you should have
experience.
Not only a paper rose, but a dozen roses a day for the the rest of your life, coming up with the ultimate answer.
True.
Everybody
Well,
that says, what do you want to be when you grow up? How many people say, I want to be a child?
well, you know, I'm turning 70 next year, and I was 32. This man would be about 100, but it was a real man and a real happening. But if he's out there, he can let you know through the radio station. It was a true story. But my whole life, sweetheart, has been a roller coaster indeed. It's been a wild ride. And
so you hold your arms up and scream on the way down.
yeah.
Enjoy it.
And
Frightened to death, but there's enjoyment in that.
and you know, I'm sure I'm wearing a lot of people mentally out, going from highs and lows, but this is really and truly how my myth has played out, my story, my life.
Well, I'm not overwhelmed with the highs and lows.
Good.
And I wanted to ask you the things that you chose for each chapter. Now, Joseph Campbell is understandable. Carl Jung is understandable. Khalil Gibran is understandable. And not that William Blake is not understandable, but I'm really impressed that how did you come across, you must have a love for William Blake's writing.
Oh, that is another story. That is another stranger story. I call them earth angel people, strangers I do not know, who toss crumbs of wisdom my way, or compliments, or things for me to contemplate and enrich my life with. When I was in when Julie was born, and oops, the character I call Elizabeth was born, and I was married to her father, I began taking oil painting classes and doing little tiny works of art and selling them at a local starving artist association gatherings. And so I was selling my little I would do little mini pieces like this, little art, mixed media, and a lot of them were children fairies, of course, and I would do them in black ink and then washes of watercolor, and then some were drawn in more ink or more acrylic style washes. And a gentleman came up and looked at my work, and he said, your artwork, your drawings look like William Blake's. And I didn't know at that time, this was in my 20s actually. I was probably 24, 25. I had never heard of William Blake. I didn't know who he was. And so I went, back then we didn't have the internet, but I went to a bookstore or a library and found his book of poems and his drawings. And I went, oh my goodness, he is a kindred soul to me. His drawings are kind of not sophisticated, certainly.
So you mean his writings? Or
His drawings. He also did drawings, sweetheart. He did drawings and then he wrote poetry. And nowadays you will hear a lot about Neville Goddard. I didn't know him until a year or so ago because he's all over the internet now and everybody loves him. But I did learn through one of the people who read from his works and teach his lectures, was that he was a huge fan of William Blake. And he was a new thought type minister and enlightened minister that I found that I connected with artistically, creatively. And later on, when I speak of my child's story, my inner child story, I do as primitive and childlike drawings as I can. But that's what his artwork looked like. And this gentleman said, these were great. They reminded him of William Blake. And I don't think everyone that the critics out there that view artwork would say at any time in my life my artwork was great, but this man did. And therefore, it was a sign from heaven, from the heavens and my angels. Check this guy out, because the tapestry of how you take your imagination into the visible world and how you paint with words are very similar to William Blake. So I've read so much of him and written it in my dream journals that of course he had to be a part of this beautiful myth, this beautiful way of looking at all my failures and heartbreaks.
So was your artwork at that time just pen and ink?
Pen and ink and washed watercolor. And then oils. I did oils in high school.
So there was some color to it.
There was some washed on watercolor to my ink drawings.
Mm-hmm. And was that fairy element there?
The fairies have been with me forever, yes, of course. And I always saw more fairy pictures than anything else I drew. I mean, I would pen and ink and do, mountain scenes that I missed when I was living in Texas. I never drew Texas because it wasn't home to me, but I love Texas. I tried to do some bluebonnets, which are famous in Texas, but I never captured quite the beauty I always wanted to do or wanted to capture with my skills. And but yeah, that's why he's in there. He's very important. Anybody that wants to go back before Neville Goddard, go back to William Blake. You will love him.
Well, it thrills me to see what you've chosen for each chapter's quote. And with that, we've ended chapter 8. And we'll be moving on, of course, to chapter 9. And we once again wish you well and bless you. I hope that you will be with us for more of the garden of the desert rose. Well, that's it for Here and Now. But until we meet again, this has been Louis Marie Blanche thanking you for listening to Conversations with Elders on Glastonbury Radio 432. Bless you.
Quantum physics in the kitchen sink, the energy that follows the thoughts you think. Quantum physics and the cosmic sea, laws of nature too heavy for me. It's too cosmic, much too cosmic for me. Much too cosmic, much too cosmic for me.